Today I'm working on this Yamaha 50 horsepower outboard. It's a 95 model. The problem with this engine is it's extremely hard to start whenever you first get to the boat ramp. Once you do get it started, then it starts super easy the rest of the day and runs great. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be putting a primer kit on it so that it's easier to start for the first time. Here's what you get every time you go to the boat ramp. Here's the primer kit. I had to buy 1/8 inch T-fitting since it didn't come with it, because this is actually made for a jet ski. So right here is where I plan on mounting the primer. It's already got a grommet stuffed in here, probably for some option that this one didn't come with. Looks like it's the perfect place, but we'll have to open it up and see what it looks like inside if you can fit the primer. Okay, now that we've got it open, take a look here. That plug is right here, and looks like the airbox has a cutout where it might fit in there. Pull that off and take a look. So right here is where that primer is going to be pointing at through this grommet. Behind here, it's just flat plastic. So even if we have to trim this off for the fuel lines to fit through, I don't think it'll be a problem. I mean, this isn't actually even an air filter or anything. It's just an air box, mainly to keep water from getting into the carburetors if I guess if the hood is off of it. This engine does have what Yamaha calls a primer solenoid right here on the middle carburetor, but really when you look at the operation of it, it's more of an enrichener than it is a primer. It doesn't actually prime the engine. It just helps keep the fuel mixture richer till the engine warms up a little, and then it can lean it out to normal air-fuel ratio. I have actually already checked this to make sure it's working properly. I did an ohms test on it, and in the past, when I've worked on this before, I actually did remove that solenoid and verify that it's operating correctly. So there seems to be no problem with the primer system on this engine. Gonna have to remove this oil tank so I can get in here to these fuel lines, because basically what we're going to be doing is teeing into the fuel line after the fuel filter before it gets to the fuel pump, running over to the primer, and then run one from the primer up to a hose here that goes to the reed block housing. I'm going to stick this bolt back in where that ground wire was, that way I don't forget where it goes. Okay, now we're going to tee into the line here between the fuel filter and the fuel pump, and that's this line right here between the filter and the pump. The line we're going to tee into to feed the engine is going to be this gray one right here, going from the primer solenoid housing up to the reed block housing. I've fed this line through, and then I've got the line disconnector from the fuel pump, so I'm just going to cut that line in half and then put the T-fitting in the middle of it. Also wanted to point out these super high-tech hose clamps they send with it. They're pretty amazing. Here's what we end up with here. So we're just going to reinstall it back up in there, and that'll be our feed line going to the primer. Got the feed line installed, and where it runs through here, back up in there, I'm afraid that it could rub a hole through the line eventually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a 5/16 fuel hose and then slide over it just to act as like an insulator. We've got the insulation hose slid over it, so it should be able to go through there without ever getting a hole rubbed through it. All we gotta do is pop this plug out of here. And that's where this plunger is going to go. Looks like it needs just a little bit of file work. Now I'm going to check, see if this airbox needs to be trimmed. So I'm going to put it in there. It's going to need to be trimmed just a little bit. The hoses would fit, but it might get kinked, and that would kind of defeat the purpose, because then it's not going to flow any fuel. So I'm going to stick this marker through here and just kind of mark the general area of where it needs to be trimmed. So that should give us our mark. I'll just trim that out. This plunger kit came with absolutely no instructions, but after pulling and pushing the plunger and putting my finger over these, I've determined that it sucks the fuel in through the one that's at an angle and pushes it out through the one that's pointing out straight. That looks pretty good, actually. Well, there's one. Now we'll go ahead and get the next one put on. Now we've got the T-fitting on the other line. Got it run all the way down through here back to the primer, and I also insulated this line with another piece of rubber hose where it's going underneath that carburetor there. You don't want any holes rubbed in it. Here's this airbox cover where I notched out the bottom of it. Alright guys, it's a moment of truth. Let's see what happens. It's never started up that easy before when it was cold.